Good evening, folks. Welcome to our Thursday, July 30th edition of the Onward Transitions Parent Forum. I'm joined tonight by Jackie Roberg, my fellow clinician and co-facilitator of our weekly process group. And as always, we have Austin behind the scenes making all this happen. So thank you to both of you for being here tonight. We're going to review the matrix and integrate that a bit with some of the transactional analysis presentation that we did 2 weeks ago. But we're going to start by having Jackie share with you a matrix that we did with the group several weeks ago in terms of their perceptions of what they would like to see in terms of their relationship with you. And then we're going to turn it around and do a matrix from the point of view of parents. So bear with us, and I'm going to turn this over to Jackie.
Okay, thank you, Andy. So like Andy said, in group, we had a group, that's probably a little over a month ago now, where we asked members about their dynamics with you all and how they might like that to shift and how their work here at Onward Transitions can support that shift. So everybody shared in the group, and at the end of that group, we created the matrix that we're showing you right now, or we'll show you shortly. And it's a group matrix, so it has contributions from each and every member, and it's based on what their ideal dynamic with their parents would look like. And so with that said, I'm going to do a quick review of the matrix. It's been a while since we've had it on here, so we just want to make sure everybody's up to speed with that. So right now we have a blank matrix up. On the x-axis, we have away and towards. So that's in regards to values. So you're either moving towards your values or away from them. And then on the y-axis, we have body and mind. So we live in our mind a whole lot. So that's down at the bottom of the matrix. And the goal of going through this and act is to bring yourself a little bit closer to the present moment. So closer to awareness of what's going on in your body and what's happening right now. In the middle is noticing. So that's you kind of being aware of all of these things that I'm going to review on the matrix. So we're going to start with the bottom left, right quadrant, which is where we usually start with members. And that is who or what is important. So that is the values. So in regards to their ideal relationship with their parents, members identified the following as their values. They identified family, trust, communication, achieving goals, boundaries, healthy boundaries, I'm assuming, kindness, autonomy, willingness to listen and hear other perspectives, support, growth and learning from mistakes, reciprocity, gratitude, individuality, and respect. So when thinking about all of those values, some of the thoughts and feelings that show up and get in the way of them moving towards those. So now we're on the bottom left quadrant of the matrix. Some of the things that they identified for icky stuff is parental health. They don't understand or can't relate, misplaced priorities, arrogance, anger. So these are feelings that they feel or things that they identify with themselves. Fear of disappointment, fear of offending or hurting feelings, fear of conflicts. I know how this is going to end, so kind of predicting the outcome without even starting. Things haven't changed. Discomfort around financial dependence. Worry that their values around family are not the same as yours, so you all having mismatched values to theirs. Fear of discomfort. Fear of or discomfort in vulnerability. So really showing up and being honest about some of the things that they're working on or struggling with. And that you might not listen and you might just want to fix things for them. So those are some of the things that show up that really get in the way of them moving towards the values that they identified. Moving to the top left. So some of the things that members engage in just to quiet down some of that icky stuff, which in turn ends up moving them away from those values. They identified the following: going with the flow instead of speaking up around their needs, isolating, shutting down, avoidance, Some of them identified using alcohol to loosen up, so to feel more comfortable, stacking their schedule to prevent all family all the time. I think that when they were talking about that, that was when they're with family. So kind of making their schedule super busy so that they don't have to be around everybody, so they can avoid certain conversations. Again, busy to avoid certain topics, busy to avoid family commitments, making snap decisions or being impulsive to gain feelings of control, even though they know that that doesn't really work. Short, or being irritable towards others, talking to every member of the family besides the person that they're irritated with about their irritation, and sometimes lying or softening their message to avoid certain conversations. So we processed kind of all of that. And then we asked the members to identify some committed actions that they could engage in that would help move them towards their desired relationship with you all. And they identified the following: speaking up about their needs, taking intentional time, having structured conversations, having parent calls, engaging more often with their family, actively thinking of things that you all can help with, and purposefully asking for those things. Finding employment, that's in relation to financial dependence, so they can get a little bit of independence in that area. Having weekly therapy, voicing how they're thinking and feeling, setting healthy boundaries again, and actively working on giving grace when things don't go as planned. So this is the member matrix. So this is kind of their perspective of things and how they would like their relationship with you all to shift. So thinking about that, Andy is going to now flip the script and try to do a matrix based off of your perspective.
Thank you. A couple of things. I just wanted to comment when we had this group with the members. This was a really lively, engaged conversation. This just wasn't just one or two people sort of offering up. This was everybody really, expressing what you just heard from Jackie about what they hope for in terms of their relationship. So it was really kind of heartening to hear all of that and to hear it again. I also wanted to remind everyone, if you have any questions, comments, anything you want to add or disagree with, please send an email off to Austin, who can introduce that into the conversation. And I wanted to mention, we had sent out a parent questionnaire. And Jackie, without necessarily going through all the responses, can you just read what the questions were, just so people are kind of thinking about the prompts?
Absolutely. So the questions we asked were: what values guide your interactions with your emerging adult? Describe how you may like to have the dynamic shift between yourself and your emerging adult. And I kind of put in there remembering about transactional analysis, so adult to adult versus adult to child. How can their work with us support that relational shift? And then what do you feel currently gets in the way of that shift happening?
Okay, thanks. And we did get some responses, and so we'll try and weave some of that into the matrix, and hopefully it won't feel like we're trying to put a round peg in a square hole here. So in terms of the parent matrix, obviously we didn't have a conversation and collect all this information from parents in the way that we did with our members. So much of what we filled in here is just based on our experience of working with parents and working with families, and honestly, my own personal experiences. I have a 28-year-old son and a 25-year-old daughter, and I'm going through all of this too. And I think pretty similar stuff gets stirred up in all of us. So I don't mean to be presumptuous and know how you all are thinking and feeling, but this was our attempt to sort of share it with you. So when I think of, the overarching goal here, what are we looking for? It's something along the lines of, we want our emerging adult children to become healthy, independent adults and live loving and fulfilling lives. So and sort of connected to that is we'd like to worry about them a little bit less. And we never stop worrying about them, but maybe a little less would be good. So if we think about the values that underlie those goals that we have for our children. What I see, what I experience are values around family, around autonomy, um, interdependence as well as independence, resiliency, mastery, reciprocity, empathy, the ability to give back, trust, boundaries, communication. And Austin, you're keeping up with me and kind of filling these things in on the thing as we go. I can't see it. Okay, thank you. And then Jackie, and from the feedback that you've gotten from parents, is that reasonably consistent with what you're hearing? Are there other things that we might want to add to that?
I think you pretty much covered it. The only one that I'm seeing that you did not cover was flexibility. So, kind of being open to changes, I imagine, is what that means. Realizing things don't always stay the same. There's always a gray area. There's always things that change and you need to be flexible for.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Okay. So, those are all wonderful values that, I think most of us share for our children. And as we try and move our young adults in the direction of all those kinds of values and goals, it can be tough for us. And so let's talk about some of the difficult thoughts and feelings that come up for parents. This is not the difficult thoughts and feelings that come up for your children or your adult children, but for all of us as parents. And a lot of it boils down to kind of worry and fear. Um, fear that they might fail, fear that they're going to struggle, worries that they're going to be upset with me if I push them too hard. And a lot of this is based on our histories. This is for many has been a pattern for a lot of years of really trying to struggle and work some of these things through with our kids. So we come by these concerns and worries honestly. The anxiety, that they can't manage. I'm worried they won't be able to handle this because they have so much anxiety. In extreme cases, they might become suicidal if I push them too hard, or hold them accountable or let them struggle. Um, and then just uncertainty, how much should I help them? How much should I stand back? Just not quite knowing, there isn't the book that tells us how to do this stuff. And then our own feelings of anger and frustration and helplessness at times. Those are powerful emotions. And then, the self-blame. What did I do wrong? What did we do wrong? What as parents weren't we paying attention to? So all those difficult thoughts and feelings can really sort of immobilize us. So Jackie, in the feedback that you've gotten, anything that you would add to that necessarily?
I think kind of to sum it up, a fear of how your emerging adult is going to respond to things, their reaction, their judgment. And then another piece that I did see was parents having a difficult time around accepting who their emerging adult wants to be if that doesn't align with their values.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, some of it, it's how are they going to react? Some of it is I got to pick my battles, and do I really want to gear up to have this kind of difficult conversation? And man, I'm tired. I don't feel like getting into it tonight. And so we don't do it. So then if we look at, okay, what kinds of behaviors, thoughts do we as parents engage in to quiet down our own stuff? Again, this isn't to quiet down them. This is to quiet us down. And just a word about the matrix again. As you move to the left of the matrix, it provides a temporary sense of relief. As you move to the right, it provides a sense of satisfaction. So, a lot of these behaviors that we engage in top left is just to provide ourselves with a sense of relief. And so some of those things that come to mind are, we may tend to over empathize or over identify with our children's struggles. I know what it's like to have anxiety and I don't want to push them too hard. just generally avoidant. We're not going to get into the conversation. Let's just sort of let sleeping dogs lie instead of dealing with the elephant in the room sometimes. A tendency to do it for them, rather than push them and allow them to sit with the discomfort of whatever the task of adulthood is. We tend to do it for them. We organize appointments for them. We set up schedules. It's sort of a continuation of all the things that we've been doing for our children, but now they're adults, and we want them to start doing these things on their own. The other part I just wanted to remind everybody, the acceptance and the commitment part. The acceptance is an acceptance that we're going to have these difficult thoughts and feelings as we move towards committed action. So, the goal isn't to make these difficult thoughts and feelings go away. It's to accept that, as I try and move forward in parenting my adult child in a healthy way, it's going to feel uncomfortable at times. And we have to figure out what to do with that. So other things, making excuses for our children. They can't help it. They have anxiety. She or he is different. They're unique, and people just don't understand her. Sometimes it can take the form of externalizing the problem. This is one that I've heard a lot, less at Onward, more in my private practice. Is the problem is my child is so bright that he's bored in class. And that's why he's having difficulty. And certainly there may be some truth to that, but I've never ever seen that really be the core issue of what's going on. Not holding them accountable because it just feels difficult. It feels like I don't want to get into a fight with them. I don't want to put up with the grief I'm going to take if I bring up all these kinds of issues. Or I just don't want to feel all the emotionality that comes along with all of this. So, Jackie, anything you would want to add to that?
I think you covered a lot of them. The only one that I can think of that we've kind of dealt with a lot here is backing down from consequences. When something happens that we said, there'd be a clear consequence, but then when it happens, you're like, it's not worth the fight. Yeah.
Yeah. So if we move to committed action, the purposeful behaviors that we and attitudes that we as parents engage in to try and help move, our adult children towards their goals and our goals. Actually, the first thing on my list was holding the line on natural and logical consequences. If they've struggled at school, certainly you want to support them, but you also want them to have to kind of work with the powers that be to figure it out. If I need to follow up with a professor because I missed a class or I missed an exam, standing back and letting them experience those natural consequences of having to kind of problem solve and work their way through that stuff. And it's hard. It's really hard as parents to just step back and let some of these things play out. A lot of it is, again, maintaining those clear boundaries and expectations, and that, as adults, we want to be able to negotiate with our adult children, and have reasonable adult conversations. But a lot of times we're getting manipulated, honestly, and we're backing away from things that, were we not faced with that sort of pressure, we'd be clear-headed that, no, this is the right course of action. This is the right thing to do, but we start to question. So really being able to maintain those boundaries. Then there's the question of what are healthy boundaries, what are unhealthy boundaries. And I don't think that there's a clear delineation between the two. But, in some ways, this becomes a process of communicating with others, getting perspective, talking to your spouse or your partner or your best friend or your therapist, in terms of, is this a healthy boundary? Am I over disclosing, family information with my child in a way that may be more helpful to me than them? because by doing so, I'm eliciting more anxiety by doing that, or creating some sort of loyalty bind by sharing things of what's going on in the family. So that one's a moving target, and I think it's different and unique for every family. Um, you know, Another committed action is seeking out and accepting guidance from others. Not feeling like you have to do this on your own. Um, and again, that can be your partner, your own parents, a trusted friend, a therapist, siblings, whoever it is. But, to just trust that you can be open and honest with someone to get some perspective on this. A lot of times as parents, we feel shame, we feel embarrassment that, man, my kids are struggling this much and somehow I feel responsible for it. So we don't talk about it. And it's really important to just get it out there and talk about it. At the same time, trusting your own gut. You know, don't if someone's giving you advice and it just doesn't feel right, part of that committed action is knowing that I've been doing this for the last 20 some years. I kind of have a good sense of my own child, of our own unique situation in my family, and to really be able to trust that. Kind of connected with that, another aspect of self-care for committed action with parents is self-care. You know, you got to take care of yourself in all of this. There was a book that came out, and it was probably 20 years ago now, the title of the book was Parent-Centered Families. And it was really challenging this notion that we need to make our children the center of our universe and build the family around them. And I think they made a pretty compelling argument that no, the parents are the center of this universe. And it's one of the ways that we create boundaries. It's one of the ways that we emotionally contain our children, that they're accountable to us. And, long after they've hopefully moved out and are having their own lives, we are still going to be here as parents. And so that's part of the self-care, being able to talk with your partner about the things that you disagree. Um, Again, in my own family, we tend to compensate for one another. If my wife feels as though I'm going too easy on things, she might go hard on things, and oftentimes it's the opposite way around, and then we argue about it. Well, you should have. A lot of the parents should have. So I think it's really very important for parents to take the time to talk those things through. You might not always be entirely in agreement, but at least you know where each other are coming from. You can anticipate how the other person is going to respond to whatever situation is coming up. Um, Communication, listening, that's one of the things that your adult children were also talking about. Committed action, the importance of communicating with one another and listening, and not just reacting. Um, Committed action is sitting with the discomfort, and sometimes just naming it. This, I feel really nervous right now. You know, and to be able to acknowledge that and sit with it, I think is really important. Um, as parents, trying to take on the role of an advisor versus an executive secretary. Your kids may come to you for guidance, and that's great. That's an appropriate boundary. You have wisdom, and you can offer them that kind of guidance. But you don't want to be the executive secretary that's doing everything for them and arranging all these things that are difficult or unfamiliar to them. So really trying to be clear about that distinction. We want to help them to do it for themselves, not do it for them, because we want to take away their anxiety. And the last thing I have on my list is keeping perspective. I really do see this as a committed action. Um, just because our adult child is coming at us with an issue that they're treating like it's a 10 on a scale of 1 to 10, that doesn't mean that we need to buy into that as a 10. It may, in reality, be more like a 3. And it's important to kind of point that out. Let's step back and take a look at this, and not just buy into reacting to it as if it's a catastrophic sort of issue. I, I over the years, I've I apologize, guys. I'm going to use this line that I use a lot. But over the years, I've talked with parents a lot, and as parents, we're willing to step in front of a freight train for our kids. We just don't always know what the freight train is going to be. But to take my metaphor one step further in this, it's not always a freight train coming down the tracks. Sometimes it's just one of those guys on one of those little carts, kind of manually powering themselves down. So we don't have to treat it like it's a freight train. We can say it's just a guy on a little cart. Step out of the way and let it go by, and you'll be fine. So perspective, I think, is really important. Jackie, more that you're hearing or that you would add to committed action?
As you were talking, the only thing that I've thought of that isn't up there, which also I just need to point out that you're speaking from like the parent perspective and I'm speaking from the emerging adult, and we kind of are those things. So that's kind of interesting. Right. Is, being really open with your emerging adult about not being perfect and owning your mistakes and apologizing when that happens. That can be so impactful for them to see and witness and have modeled for them. And I guarantee it can change how they'll interact with you when they're making a mistake in the future. So I think that's a really important committed action. And I'm going to take from the members matrix here and say, having intentional time and structured conversations and taking advantage of parent calls that we do here at Onward Transitions, because that is a very great way to have that happen.
Okay. So one other question that came up was, what are healthy expectations? And how to push the comfort zone. And again, there isn't a clear black and white to this. But, again, I think healthy expectations are, you develop them over the course of being a parent, and based on your own values, a healthy expectation for one family might be, we expect you to get a part-time job by the time you're 16 and, start to pay for some of your school clothes, for example. I'm not saying that that's a hard and fast thing, but this is sort of the fluidity of, healthy expectations can vary from family to family. For other folks, it's okay. A healthy expectation at this point, you're at Onward Transitions, is now that you're working part-time, we'd like you to start taking on some of the finances. Maybe you're going to take over your cell phone payment, that sort of stuff. Expectations of you're with your young adults now, we're kind of past that point of curfews and we want you home by midnight. Although, if they come home for a visit, it's still your home and they're living under your roof, and it's reasonable to lay out some of those kinds of expectations. At the same time, Jackie makes a really good point. As a parent, I kind of lose track sometimes of the fact that my kids tell me I think I'm never wrong. And and so it's important to have those conversations with your young adults. All right, let's talk about this. What are some reasonable expectations for this visit, for this trip we're about to take, for alcohol consumption while we're, in the Bahamas, whatever it is. So I think that's really key, Jackie, is that we're engaging our young adults in creating those expectations with us together. We're not just imposing them anymore. That's an important shift that I think that we have to make.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I was just going to say, which goes with what you were saying, treating them as the expert of their own experience, even if there is disagreement there, because as an adult, they are an expert of what they're experiencing and what they're going through. And I think also, when you're talking about expectations, working with your emerging adult to identify what values for them are underlying those expectations can be extremely helpful, because then if they understand what they're moving towards by following those expectations, there's going to be more of an internal motivation there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed. Okay, I think that about covers our presentation for tonight. Again, please give us some feedback. We can certainly follow up with what we here, the next time we all get together, because we really want your input, and if there are other ways that we can be more helpful to you, we want to hear that, and we'll try and work it into the way we do things around here. So with that, I think, Austin, we figured we will not have a forum in 2 weeks because you're going to be away. So it will be in 3 weeks. I don't remember what the date is. I think it might be the 20th of August. But we'll get to you and make sure you know what it is. So once again, thank you all for joining us, whether you join us live tonight or taking the time to look at this later in the week. We really appreciate your commitment to helping your young adult kids move towards independence. So thank you, Jackie and Austin, and good night, everybody.